Let's bring Jeremy back out, first of all. Should be. And then why don't you introduce?
So,
Unexpected guest.
I'm really excited to do this because Robert Patrick Stern is here. Come on up, Robert, who is the cinematographer. And a lot of you worked on this movie, and maybe you know, maybe you don't. Every shot in this film was pre-planned out, and actually the movement was acted out by Robert and the director before any of us arrived. The room was designed specifically for every move in the script, and every move in the script, every camera move in the script was pre-planned. And we were talking earlier, and you said you probably only lost maybe 11 shots that you wanted.
Yeah, we pretty much got everything that we wanted for the most part. There were a couple of days we lost one here and there, but we might have gained another, so I consider it a win.
How long did it take you to plot out all those shots with Ted?
Weeks and weeks and weeks. Ted and I went through quite a bit of breakdown. We broke down the script, you know, in our normal process, each of us, but then we would actually funny enough, we built this whole thing in a conference room without the set even being there. And we used to call it like chalking it out, but we actually taped it out on a floor and would act it out ourselves, literally delivering Jeremy's lines, Ann's lines, just Ted and I for hours and hours, just making sure that this person would go over to the radio, this person would go to the window, this person would go to the fireplace, and it all work out and not be boring, and it would be fluid. So hopefully we accomplished that.
Let's back it up a little bit. Where exactly did you shoot this? And was this a situation where you built a 360 set with like walls that could be taken out and stuff like that? Was that kind of how it was? Oops, sorry.
I should really give this up to Sarah Sharp, who is here in the audience as well. The actual room was built in Elgin, Illinois. If you're familiar, that's just west of here in the west suburbs. And the actual exterior was shot not too far away from here. It was, I don't know, roughly a mile away from here. We found the nearest thing we could to a brownstone in Brooklyn and shot that on a cold, cold day in December of 2021.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just go back to usually in a horror film, if a seance is like a scene or maybe two scenes that you get. This is a movie that is the whole seance, basically. That's freaky. Like, tell me about just like when you read that. Did you? Because I don't know if I've ever seen a movie that handled it this way. Tell me just about just overall when you first read this. What were some of the things that stood out for you from the horror perspective? We'll get into some of the subtext.
Right. So We Are Still Here has a seance scene in it with Larry, and people kept saying, Ted, you should write a whole movie as a joke. And so then he did, of course. When I read it, I think from the moment I read it to the moment I was on set was maybe a month. So, and when I saw the magnitude of the line load on all 6 actors, that's a lot. Because really it's just 6 people in a room talking for 91 minutes. That line load is heavy. And I knew that it was going to be a lot of pages every day. So that was the first thing I identified. Okay, this is something to take on. It's during COVID, and it's a horror movie with just people talking and a little bit of, effects going on.
Yeah.
Right. So it was a huge challenge, but the subject matter was so interesting, and it felt like it was a character I've never played before. It was exciting. I was scared to death of it, so I knew that I had to do it.
So let me ask about your character specifically, because I just watching some of it again. You have the most colorful clothes of anyone and I'd forgotten thinking back to when I first saw it. It didn't register with me how much color there is in the room too. But you really kind of stand out. Did you have any say in the way that your character was dressed, or like why he was dressed that way?
No, that was all really in the design, and the costume design and the production design are very intricately related to one another. The deep greens and the red hues, you know, are really typical of that era, and the way that it's saturated in every single prop and every single set element, it's there for a reason. So no, but I did, once I put on the costume, that was when I felt finally comfortable playing this guy. I asked Ted, I said, hey, you know, I've been doing a lot of research. I read a really interesting book written by a woman who wrote letters to World War II vets to comfort them. And then I read some of the letters that they wrote back to her. She actually lived in Chicago and she wrote hundreds of letters. So that was one of my big insights into the character. But then when I said, Ted, I'd like a mustache. And at first he fought me on it. He said, no, I don't think Archie has one. And I said, no. And then I sent him a picture of Errol Flynn, and that won him over. But then when I put the jacket on for the first time, that's when I was comforted. I knew that I could pull it off as long as Rob was able to do his job.
We talked about it before, but this is structured like a one-act play, basically. And so, did you get to reap the benefits of a play, like by doing this chronologically, like shooting this chronologically? Have you ever done that before? What were some of the things that you liked about it? And maybe, I don't want to ruin the illusion, but movies aren't usually shot in order. So the scenes are usually shot in order, but did you guys get to do that?
When did we shoot the beginning scene and the end scene, Rob? What day was that?
I think it was like maybe day 13, so not quite mid-schedule.
Out of how many days?
You're not going to believe it. Probably 16 days.
I believe it.
We were moving very quick on this one.
There were days when we did 10 pages.
So other than that,
it's crazy.
Everything else was then?
Yeah. So we started the first day. We rehearsed. We went through all our blocking on day one, except for the outside scenes. Went through all our blocking. We had little dance cards with all our moves on them, what page, what line. He was very organized. And then the second day we started shooting, and then we went in order until we shot the first and the last scene kind of toward the middle of the middle endish of the shoot. Yeah. So it was pretty much in order. That was fun, but you had to keep 3 days, which is like 20 pages of dialogue in your head, because you might jump ahead a little bit to block shoot stuff, which means that you leave the camera in the same place and shoot everything for those pages. You might move ahead, you might go back and pick something up. You had to keep the emotional spot you were in, and it's a very emotional script. You saw there's a lot of high stakes stuff, so you had to monitor that. Also your physical continuity, your costume continuity, the prop continuity, like kudos to everyone.
Yeah, kudos to the prop team, because they did some really awesome things with even the black light they used, because you know, on the table with the glasses, there's actually circles that you can't see that they would use black light to place in the exact spot every single day. And just some really interesting things they did to kind of get ahead of it, because it's real time, like there can't be any continuity errors, so it's pretty fun to watch.
So when you're shooting, when you're shooting in a single location though, that's meant to be an enclosed space, does that start to wear on you? Does it start to get in your head that like, well, we're trapped in this room, like these people were? Like, I mean, I didn't realize you could leave, but at the same time, being in a single location must have been...
It actually was awesome.
Yeah.
It plays on the character in a good way. But our bond, I don't think I've ever been quite so bonded to a cast, because we had this little area outside of the set, what we called mini holding, with these nice chairs and heaters because it was cold. But being together we were, you know, rarely in a movie are you with the same people every day for the whole shoot. Like toward the end, usually it's 1 or 2 people left at the end in the crew, and it kind of gets sad. But in this case, we were all together, you know, the whole time, and every day you're building up momentum toward the end, and you're using your relationships and your onset. And we were like herding cats. We were pretty difficult to.
Yeah, this group was like singing and dancing while we were trying to change things sometimes, but it was amazing to see them all come together and just kind of live this thing out and be able to live in a period piece. It was phenomenal.
So we were talking before about some of the subtext here, which isn't that sub, but just this idea, there's this idea that this is a very American story, because not just because it's about Americans, but because it's about this absolute need that we have to have an enemy. Like, we need an enemy to keep going. And I feel like the one character, that's what's driving him, is just like, it's what's keeping his friend alive in his head, is that he still has one more person he could kill to like have an enemy. And the paranoia that comes with that, and the irrational thought that comes with that. Talk a little bit about, and all these people have something to hide, so talk about that aspect of it. The very modern, I think it's a very modern take on a 40s set movie.
You know, in many ways, we're living through it again. All of the xenophobia that's stoked up in World Wars I, when Gavrilo Princip assassinated Franz Ferdinand, and then again, you know, in World War II, with the invasion of Poland by the Germans, and who fought them with a horse cavalry. They were the last horse cavalry, and they were, you know, decimated by the tanks. And you know, now we're seeing it again, and I'm very certain that in the coming election, the war in Ukraine will be used as a battering ram, you know, an assault on common decency, and that's what this film really highlights. You know, it's a horror movie, but really it's a social commentary that we desperately need right now.
But it is also a film about whether or not there's an afterlife, and it sort of, I mean, in its own way, it's confirming that there is. I mean, that's the idea, which I have to imagine, given what you said at the beginning of the film, that really must have felt very personal to Ted. Can you talk, did he say anything about that aspect of it?
One of the things Ted brought up to me in regards to the movie was also that, like, people coming back after the war, knowing that, like, it was like, we won the war, this was a big deal for the country, but also realizing that not everything was okay. Like, in this movie, he wanted to express that, and he did, and it was just like, yeah, we all won, we're all happy to be back, but we still got to deal with a lot of things, and this is not okay.
You know, what did Nietzsche say? God is dead and we killed him. You know, I think there's a real argument for that thought, and for me personally, you know, I believe in something, and you know, I think it's love. And yes, this is a horror movie, and it's a history piece, and it's a drawing room drama, but really it's also about, you know, whatever part of you that is God, or that you see in someone else that is God, where, you know, you're striving for that, unless you're Larry.
Yes. Were you, what was I going to ask? Were you in the room when Larry did that to him, smashed his head against the table? Did you guys have to sit and watch that? Or the way it's shot, he could have been in a room by himself, but I'm wondering, did you get to see any of that?
I think it was shot in 3 parts, and one big part we were not there for. Some of the Larry stuff we were there for, but there were 2 parts, right, that we weren't.
I mean, mainly because the wardrobe itself, like, you know, we had to make sure that some of these guys were out of the room. His coat was killer, so we couldn't get that all full of splatter. But I was right next to it, and I think it was done in 3 different parts.
Wow. Okay, I'm gonna ask one more question, then if you guys have any, we have time for a couple of questions from the audience. This idea of having a female interrogator, I don't know if that's historically accurate. I don't care, because it's great. And Anne Ramsey's like the secret weapon in this movie. Not so secret, but she's like the greatest thing in this movie. It kind of almost, it changes the power dynamic in the room, because at one point she is in control of everything. And can you talk a little bit about that, and what did she bring to that, and what is that, having it be a woman being like the scariest person in the room for a time? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, she is such a dynamic, she's a transformative actress, because the person you're seeing up there has nothing to do. In fact, if you saw her walking down the street, y'all, you would not recognize her. I guarantee you. you would not recognize her. You know, this male-dominated situation, it's so interesting to have a woman, you know, take control and be the instrument of torture. I don't know, did Ted talk to you about that, Rob? No.
We didn't review that a lot. We basically spent a lot of time making sure that those scenes felt as sharp as they could, like image-wise, just having, you know, the finger and everything really play out in a way that like felt as pointed as it could, and maybe that's something he was hinting at.
This scene always makes people squirm. I watched it, it's the squirmiest.
I know at least one person walked out during that scene. I mean, just stood outside, came back in later, but those are also some of the closest shots you have during the interrogation scene.
Right.
It's very intimate, it's very...
Right, I mean, with an ensemble piece, we have 6 people, technically, but we have 5, we lose one and then gain another. But like, we end up, you know, having to keep everybody, the ensemble, on screen as much as possible. So going to a tight, or a close-up, as we call it, you know, you only use it when you need to. It's, you know, when you cut to a close-up, there's gotta be a reason for it. And in those moments, we try to hold back, and in that moment, you use it and capitalize on it.
Does anyone, it's a little hard to see, but does anyone have any, okay, I see one there.
Yeah, I know you said you read a bunch of World War II letters for role preparation. What else did you do for this role?
I looked at a lot of photographs from the period, and I was a student of history in college, so I kind of went back to some of those World War II history books that I have in my, you know, my book collection. But really that book with all those letters, because it was the language in it, the way they think, the way they spoke. Ted graciously changed a few words that I spoke, that I took from those letters. But that book was, you know, hugely important. And then photographs. Photographs are great because they give you an emotional kind of feeling about it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? He just reminded me of that. Is someone have a hand up? I just can't see it. No. Oh, okay, yeah.
Can you talk about the aspect ratio change?
That was all Ted. Ted, like, one of the first things he asked me was like, how do you feel about going from 4:3 to 2:35 in one shot? And I was like, oh man. Okay, let's try it. And thankfully I had an amazing Steadicam operator, Erdem, who's here, Erdem Mattel, who's here, who did an amazing work on this movie, and also operated as well. We were able to basically frame for both, which I would not advise, but we spent a lot of time throughout this whole movie just crafting it and tailoring it, and especially for that type of ratio change, we had to be super thorough on what we were doing. So the room was even built out with some of these ideas, and the lighting as well, which I give a shout out to Dave Risner, who's here, our gaffer, who did an amazing job with the practical lighting effects and everything that was done.
I actually have one more question, but I want to see if anyone else does real quick. Oh, there you go, sorry.
I was just wondering if you could speak to the choice to make your character gay, especially in 1945. How you thought that added to the character?
Well, I think there have always been gay people, so this is, thank God, and we just haven't, we're in it, that was a time when, it wasn't really written about openly, though it was written about, just not openly. And so for me, it was really interesting to do the research on that and find out about the secret clubs and the way that was used for them to communicate. But thank God we live in a time where, at least if you live in the north of this country, you can be openly gay and you're just a human being, which is what you are. That's how I approached it in the script.
You mentioned in your opening remarks about Ted, the role that Ted's father played in the script. And I remember the order of events that I've heard is that Ted wrote it, sent it to his father, and just said, does this read right? Does this feel like, especially like the military aspects of it, do you happen to know any of the changes he made. I know he changed like the ranks of some of the people in it just to make it a little more believable. Do you know any of the other things that he might have contributed?
Yeah, the language, the historical facts, where the bombs would have been, what kind of weapons like pineapples would have been used, military things like that, the placement of the school, and the historical elements. I think his dad really like fine-tuned for him.
All right, last chance. We're gonna watch out for one more, if there is one more. And these guys will be here, so you can talk to them afterwards if you want. If not, okay, we got another movie at midnight. Okay,
Thank you.
Gentlemen,
Thank
thank
you
you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you guys for sticking around.